Let's go to our breaking news story from this morning in Syria, where Israel is to blame for the downing of a Russian military plane off the coast of Latakia. That's according to the Russian Defense Ministry. It claims the Israeli Air Force used the Il-20 plane as cover from Syrian air defences, missiles from which hit the aircraft. 15 crew members died as a result. 4 Israeli fighter jets had been targeting Syrian facilities in Latakia province at the time.
On the 17th of September at around 10 p.m, 4 Israeli fighter jets launched guided bombs on Syrian military facilities near the city of Latakia. The bombing occurred in the immediate vicinity of where the Russian Il-20 was coming into land. The Israeli jets deliberately created a dangerous situation. The Israeli pilots used the Russian plane as cover against the Syrian air defense systems. As a result, the Russian Il-20 was brought down by a Syrian air defense missile. There's no way the Israeli pilots could not have seen the Russian plane.
The Israeli military confirms its jets had targeted Syrian facilities, but blamed the plane's downing on the Syrian government itself, along with Iran and Hezbollah, which Israel views as a terrorist group. We asked Damascus to comment on the Israeli allegations, and we'll bring you any response we do get. Our Middle East correspondent Paula Sleer has more.
Well, we're hearing from Israeli officials that anytime soon the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will hold a phone conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin. We're also hearing from a senior Israeli official that Israel is maintaining ongoing contact with the Russian government and the Russian military officials at all levels and providing details. From the Israeli army side, they have conducted an initial inquiry and they have released their statements to put the blame of this downing of the Russian plane firmly on the shoulders of Syria. They say, to quote, that there was extensive, inaccurate and indiscriminate Syrian anti-aircraft fire that was used. They also point out that when the Russian plane was downed, it was not in the vicinity where the Israeli Air Force planes had conducted their operation, and that it also happened when Israeli planes were already back in Israeli airspace. Now, the Israeli Defense Forces has issued a statement in which it expressed regret. It said it mourned the killing of 15 Russian servicemen, and while it acknowledged that it had in fact carried out these bombings in Syria, as I say, it did not put the blame on its shoulders. Take a listen.
Israel expresses sorrow for the death of the air crew members of the Russian plane that was downed tonight due to Syrian anti-aircraft fire. Israel holds the Assad regime, whose military shot down the Russian plane, fully responsible for this incident.
Now, in that same statement, the Israeli army went on to say that it had notified its Russian counterparts using existing communication mechanisms of its Air Force operations. Now, this does seem to contradict what came out of a phone conversation earlier between the Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and his Israeli counterpart Avigdor Lieberman. In that conversation, the Russian Defense Minister said that there was less than a minute before the Russian plane was hit that the Israelis informed the Russian side of the operation. He also said that there was no way that the pilots could not have seen the Russian plane that was landing from an altitude of some 5 kilometers. Now, 15 servicemen were killed. It happened at around 10 o'clock last night, Monday night, local time. The Russian plane was on its way back to the Hamamim Air Force Base near the Syrian city of Latakia. It was some 35 kilometers off the Syrian coast when it lost radar signal. The Israelis used 4 F-16 fighter jets to strike a number of targets inside Syria, one of which was a power station, and reports are that some 7 people on the ground were injured from those strikes. At the same time, there was a French frigate that was firing from the Mediterranean Sea. On the ground right now in Syria, there is a search and rescue operation underway. So on a diplomatic level, we're waiting to hear more from the Israeli side and looking towards this phone conversation that will happen between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Putin.
Now, the downed Russian plane was an Il-20. It's a patrol military aircraft known by NATO as Kut. Top speed of nearly 700 kilometers an hour, quite a big wingspan as well. It's renowned for its durability. The Il-20 has been in service since Soviet times. According to the manufacturer, this one was due to remain there until around 2020. Now, Russia's defense minister has said that Israel used the Russian jet as cover for airstrikes. As it expected, Syria wouldn't respond. Vladimir Putin agreed with Sergei Shoigu's findings, adding that the downing of the plane was the consequence of a tragic chain of events. Well, we're now joined, we should be joined live any minute by political writer and commentator Marwa Osman. Well, that's going to happen a bit later when we do get her online. Now, we heard that press conference earlier from Mr. Putin and the Prime Minister of Hungary, Orban, where Mr. Putin said there would be a response from Russia as well, which would guarantee the safety and security of Russian personnel and infrastructure in Syria. That response would be visible straight away. That's according to Mr. Putin. Now, last night's incident wasn't the only Israeli action in Syria against military targets. I discussed previous cases earlier with RT's Nadira Tudor.
And the reason why Russia are pointing the finger at the Israelis is because of those past hostile actions, saying that Israeli forces often took aim at Syrian targets. So if we go back, rewind to the 10th of February 2018, that's where an Israeli F-16 fighter jet crashed after being hit by Syrian air defences during an offensive in Syria. The two pilots parachuted to safety before the crash in northern Israel, and it's believed that that was the first time that Israel lost one of its jets during the Syrian conflict. The plane was hit during airstrikes which happened in response to an Iranian drone going into Israeli territory. That drone was shot down, and then Israel later launched further strikes. What we do have here is the explanation from the Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu as to the motivation behind that attack.
I've been warning for some time about the dangers of Iran's military entrenchment in Syria. Iran seeks to use Syrian territory to attack Israel for its professed goal of destroying Israel. This morning, Iran brazenly violated Israel's sovereignty. They dispatched an Iranian drone from Syrian territory into Israel, and this demonstrates that our warnings were 100% correct. Israel holds Iran and its Syrian host responsible for today's aggression. We will continue to do whatever is necessary to protect our sovereignty and our security.
Now, following that incident, a phone call did take place between President Putin and Prime Minister Netanyahu, and they agreed that military coordination with regards to Syria must continue. They also agreed that they needed to avoid any steps that would lead to new confrontation in the region. That was according to Interfax News. Now, I'll explain a couple more incidents. On the 9th of April, Russia and Syria accused Israel of carrying out strikes against T4 air base, which is near Palmyra in central Syria. The Russian Defense Ministry, they said that an Israeli aircraft launched 8 missiles. 5 of those were intercepted by Syrian air defense systems. And just 1 month on, if we go forward, there was a face-to-face meeting between Putin and Netanyahu on the 8th of May in 2018. And Netanyahu came out after that meeting and said that Russia was unlikely to limit actions in Syria, Israeli actions in Syria. 2 days after that meeting, another incident happened. And we can't forget the Syrian reaction, considering that these airstrikes are taking place without a UN mandate.
This aggressive conduct by the Zionist entity will lead to nothing but an increase in tensions in the region.
What we do know is that the Syrian government invited Russia to help during the Syrian civil war back in 2015, and Russia has almost turned a blind eye to these Israeli airstrikes that have been taking place. They've been feeling that they've been acting as diplomats in a very complex region, mediating between the various players, Israel being one of them. So if we look at the bigger picture and at this latest incident, which took place at 10 p.m. local time on the 17th of September, the Russian Ministry of Defense is saying that the Israeli jet hid behind the Russian plane, which led to it being set on fire. That's a bold accusation from Russia, and maybe it's because of these continuous airstrikes that have been going on, despite the fact that Israel and Russia have been allies. They have been claiming to be friends of Russia, and that's a contradiction in itself from the Russian perspective. It's almost like a betrayal for them. So there's no doubt that tensions between the two nations have grown.
Sultan Mahmoud Ali, a former member of the Pakistan Air Force, gave us his reaction to the incident.
But as a former aircrew, as a former flyer, I can analyze and give you my personal opinion. I could be wrong, but I believe that, you see, in this particular case, there is a possibility that Russia is right, that this bigger radar shadow of the IL-20 was used as a cover for attacking Israeli F-16 fighter aircraft, because please remember that in February, for the first time, an Israeli F-16 was shot down by a similar missile. And this time, there is a chance that they may not be willing to take the risk of, facing the fire coming from the Syrian side, and they may have taken cover of the bigger aircraft. Now, you see, I've flown in that area, and I know very well that there are radar contacts available. The Israelis must be monitoring it, and there are Israeli controllers who speak the Russian language. They could have forewarned this particular aircraft, but the warning which came only a minute short of it was far too late. That means that the die had been cast, and these 16 aircrew and the ill-fated IL-20 had already been sacrificed to save those 4 F-16s. I mean, this is my personal opinion. Now, who has given permission to the Israelis to come and bomb them over there? The United Nations is there. Mossad is supposed to be one of the topmost intelligence agencies in the world. Why can't it share its information with Russia, or more importantly with the United Nations, which can take action over there? If they are going to take clandestine action, and they also claim that they have done it 200 times earlier, then I think such an accident was waiting to happen, and I'm sorry, for the time being, prima facie, it seems Israel is to be blamed.
Russia's foreign ministry summoned the Israeli ambassador over Monday night's events. Reports are coming in that the Israeli Prime Minister plans to hold a phone conversation with Vladimir Putin very shortly today. We have discussed with the director of Knossos think tank, Amar Wakaf, how exactly relations between Russia and Israel are likely to play out after this.
Well, what we expect as a first response is to limit Israeli capability inside Syrian and probably Lebanese airspace. The Israelis are not going to be given free hand anymore, we think. It would be the natural response, because there must have been a lot of pressure on Russia from Syrian leadership, from the Syrian government, saying, look, these people are reigning free, we can't stop them, you don't upgrade our systems are too old, and you don't participate in this. Now Russia has been a victim of these shenanigans itself, so it can make a step forward in this, and can draw a line and say, okay, no more Israeli intervention, otherwise we will take action, and we've always warned against Russian servicemen being targeted, and now it happened. We're not going to allow this anymore. So this is the first response that we expect.